Hello, and welcome to the Innovation Women Speak webinar series. My name is Bobby Carlton. I'm the founder of Innovation Women, and we are talking today with an awesome team from Girl Friday Productions. By the way, all of the speakers on the Innovation Women webinar series are Innovation Women speakers, so you can find them at innovationwomen.com. And by the way, if you're not yet a speaker on our platform, there's going to be a special discount code at the end of the presentation if you join Innovation Women by midnight tonight. Actually, oh heck, I'm going to give you that discount code right now. So if you're interested in signing up to be a speaker on Innovation Women, you can do that. So today's special discount code is IWWebinar GFP. And that stands for Girl Friday Productions, our guest today. So you will get 25% off your first year of Innovation Women, and that is good until midnight tonight. So, as I mentioned, today's featured guests are Christina Henry DeTesson and Megan Harvey of Girl Friday Productions. And today's format is a fireside chat. I'll be asking Christina and Megan questions throughout the webinar, and we encourage you to ask questions as we go as well. I'll walk you through that now and show you how to do that. So along with other features you'll have at your fingertips during this webinar. So in front of you, you're seeing an annotated version of our screen. Below the video viewing window, there are tabs. The default tab is for asking questions. You can type a question in at any point during the program, and we'll get to it. Meanwhile, if you want to test that out, you can actually go in there right now, click on Ask a Question, and say hello. Give us your name, where you're from, and maybe if you're writing a book or planning to write a book. Another tab is for attachments. You'll be getting 2 documents today from Girl Friday Productions, and there's also a tab called Rate. This enables you to rate the webinar and provide us with feedback. We actually read all of your feedback, and we adjust things if we get requests from our listeners. So this has been super helpful to us. And if any time you need audio help, feel free to click on the Help button at the bottom of the screen. If you're using your phone to dial in, you may need to mute your computer audio. So now we are going to go over and say hello to today's speakers. Hello, ladies.
Hi, Bobby. Thanks so much for having us on. We're really happy to be able to talk with you ladies today. This is Megan.
Hi, this is Christina, and we're so happy to be here.
Yeah, thanks so much for joining us. Can you give us a little bit of an introduction to Girl Friday Productions?
Yeah, Girl Friday has been around for 12 years, and we work with both individuals and traditional publishers to help to produce books. And so that includes editorial, design, marketing, project management, basically all of the steps to create professional quality books. So Girl Friday's been around for a while, and it started out much smaller, but with the growth of the new self-publishing landscape, we're
firmly in that space now.
So I have to ask, here we are today in this day and age, and we are talking about books. I'm sure you guys must get the question all the time, why would you spend time and effort to create something that's so involved as a book when it's just so much easier to tweet or blog?
That is a great question, Bobby. This is Megan. I would say it is precisely because tweets and blogs are so easy to create that having a book becomes such a powerful differentiating tactic in a crowded landscape. I mean, every marketer has heard that content is king, but the problem with that idea is that basically everyone is doing content marketing now. So the landscape, regardless of what you're trying to market, is really, really busy. And Whereas 5 years ago, it might have been enough and given you an edge to have a social following or a platform or have a blog perhaps. Today, everyone is doing it. So you're not standing out anymore if you're just doing that. And if you're not doing that, you're not even really participating that much. So in this kind of super content-heavy marketing landscape, having a book is something that will give you that thought leadership edge to stand out in a way that short-form content marketing doesn't really do anymore.
Yeah, it has. This is Christina here. I just wanted to add it has real psychological staying power. The tweets and the blogs are all important. You want that following, of course, but that material is so ephemeral. And if you have a book, there's something about the physical staying power that somebody can bring home and have on their desk and keep with them that keeps you front of mind. And I think also that it gives you a chance to tell your story in a different way than just responding to the immediate trends.
Yeah. I mean, how often as an expert do you think, I think this all the time when I'm writing blogs, I have so much more information that I'm conveying through this tiny piece of content, and the long-form book gives you the opportunity to do something much more in-depth. And ultimately, the thing is, books still confer authority. So, you know, we live in an environment, or especially now, where you can write anything online, and people still understand that a book has been edited and reviewed, and there's a certain level of quality that goes into that process. So it does confer authority just by existing. And the short answer, honestly, is that if you have a book, you're more of an expert than somebody who doesn't.
Right. I think the other thing I would add is that even if people have not read your book, the existence of the book is something that you can use in so many ways. Every bio for someone who's written a book, it's author so-and-so has written this award-winning book, or not even award-winning, or so-and-so has written the book on this subject. Mm-hmm. Like, you've heard this time and time again, and it's part of their bio, and it's part of what gives them gravitas and legitimacy. So that's, yeah.
we used to call it the 1 pound calling card.
Yes, and I would add to that, it is, and we call it that too. The $20 business card is how we talk about it, and a lot of brands will use it in that way. I mean, I think it's a very important marketing tactic, but it also, unlike a lot of other marketing tactics, it is a passive income stream for people, which is a nice side benefit. Who doesn't want a passive income stream?
Good. That sounds great. You guys know that I've been considering writing a book, so this has been a terrific introduction to kind of like really cementing, why I've been talking about this and thinking about this for a while. Maybe you can give us some other examples about how people might leverage a book for their brand.
Yeah, we would love to. There's nothing we love more than success stories, and I think that we have a few examples of people who have really used books in different ways. And I think we're gonna move forward to Court Mcdermott. So she did a book with us a couple of years ago, and she's a great classic example of how a book can elevate a speaker's visibility and credibility. She was already a coach and motivational speaker. Before she came to us, she was about to do a TEDx talk, and she wanted a book to set her up as a more well-rounded expert in her field. And so she came to us, and I think what was interesting was that she had a very, very clear vision for the book she wanted. She didn't want to write her entire life story. She didn't want something really text-heavy. She wanted something light and accessible and workbookish. And so we took the material she had and formatted it into like a very fun, sort of design-heavy book. And she mostly uses her book as a gift and product for sale after her keynote workshops and trainings, podcasts, and interviews. And she told us there were a number of positive side benefits, including, this is great, the ability to raise her fees and earn a healthy source of passive income. But she said it's really great to positively impact people she'll never meet. so, and she got great press for her book, which again generated more interest in her and her visibility and desirability as a speaker. And I sort of love this. She said to us, what was even more satisfying than all of the press were the everyday readers who wrote things like, after reading this book, I feel like I can conquer the world. So, and as a side note, she also said it's great to be at conferences and events and to see her book prominently on tables and visible. And so her book did really a lot to boost her career.
Yeah, she is a great classic example of like the book as a business card, I would say, even though she sells it, it's available on Amazon and stuff, but she definitely uses it in conjunction with these events that she's at to extend her message beyond like the moment that she's speaking to people. It goes home with them, they use it, they digest it, it stays with them for much longer.
It sits on the table next to their bed.
Absolutely, right next to it. Another good example is a client we worked with last year. His name is Darlow, and he is also a consultant in the sports marketing space. So he was formerly a director of marketing at Adidas, and several years ago struck out on his own to build his own personal brand as a consultant in this space, working with athletes. And he has said the book is like the actual centerpiece to his authority building efforts. Like he said, no one would listen to me if I didn't have a book in my byline, basically. He's a consultant. The whole point of his job is to be an expert, and so he says that the book is the proof of his thought leadership. He also did a really awesome design on his book. He was very innovative with the way that he approached the material, knowing his audience, knowing the kind of material they wanted to digest was certainly not a big footnoted general nonfiction. So he has like a super dynamic layout, which is fun to see. Just sort of think about like the different ways that a book can come to life. But he again uses this as a calling card, essentially. And then he also uses it as the basis for his online content marketing. So yes, he's gone through this huge effort to put this whole book together, and that is a big deal to do. But then this book exists as like, he can rework this material over and over again and cut it up into bite-sized pieces and create a social plan out of it, or take a single concept or a single portion or excerpt and work with publicists to amplify it that way. So it kind of gives him a really nice jumping off point for his other content marketing efforts versus starting at, I think we've all been, especially entrepreneurs, you've been here, I know you have, like sitting at a blank page and saying, I have to figure out a content plan for the year. The book has sort of given him a basis from which to do that makes his job of content marketing a lot easier.
Nice.
And then I like this example too. Royce Ki. I'm going to show it. Royce Ki. came to us about a year and a half ago, and he was the co-founder of the Huffington Post. And he said his issue, he already had a brand, he already had a lot of visibility and exposure and a following, but his personal brand had been subsumed by and was totally tied into that Huffington Post persona. And he was identified as an editor and media executive only. And with this book, he was hoping to change that perception altogether. And the book went a long way to accomplishing that goal. So he said it too, for him, turned into a dynamic calling card. And it showed that there was a different side to him. He was funny. He had these personal stories. He was edgier than he could be in his other, persona. And so I think for him it was a rebranding exercise. And so it not only served as an introduction to the people he already knew, but also expanded his reach dramatically to people who'd never heard of him. And one of the things I really like that he said is that readers have forged a really intimate connection and sense of familiarity with him. And this is part of his telling his personal story. That was part of his goal. So he said that, I found myself connecting with people in a surprisingly deep way. And I think the other thing that was interesting about his approach was that he did already have this following. And he was very adept at using what he already had in place and having the book, everything amplified everything else. So it was part of this ecosystem where everything got a boost, you know, his social media following the book, everything. So he was very strategic about how to use it effectively. So
yeah. And we have a couple more.
Yeah. You want to, let's see. We have,
So this is an example of a different kind of book plus sort of a package, and what you see here is the book on the left, and then what's in progress right now. This is a spread because it's under construction still, but this is a workbook, like an ancillary workbook that this woman is. She's a consultant also. She has this nonfiction style thought leadership, you know, general nonfiction style classic book on the left. The spread on the right is a workbook takedown of the concepts in the book to the left. So she's working on building out her offering to, obviously she can sell the workbook in addition to the book. It's like an add-on product. And it also functions to help people make that connection with her ideas in their own lives more. So again, it has sort of psychological, like, cementing of her concepts into their life or whatever they're working on. So her little workbook style ancillary product goes a long way to that goal for her. Yeah. That's how she's using this book. And then, oh, sorry, let me scoot back. Here, yep. We wanted to mention another book just to sort of show you the range of different kinds of branded books out there. This is a health and wellness yoga instructor in Jamaica named Sharon Fiani. She came to us wanting to create a branded book that she could give away with her. She does a lot of like retreat type things for, you know, a week in Jamaica, and they're doing yoga and health and wellness workshops and things like that. And so she created this cookbook that follows her detox plan and had all the photos shot and everything. So this format isn't what you would necessarily think of as a branded book, but it is, and it functions for her in both that business card sense, where she'll often give it away as like a surprise and delight factor at these events that she has. So people sign up and they get this free book, and that's beautiful. They take it home to their own kitchen and continue to implement Sharon Fiani into their lives. Yeah. But you can see how in all of these cases, these books extend so much farther beyond. It basically extends your relationship with your audience in a way that a speaking event ends, and that's the end. This is like the big extension back into their lives.
And she also uses it as a tactic for getting into places that she couldn't otherwise get into. So her situation is maybe somewhat unique, but she uses it as a strategy. She goes into yoga studios or spaces where she otherwise might not be able to get into, offers a free class, gets to talk about the book, and then sell the books on the spot. So she's gotten very creative in the way she reaches her audience. And I think it's an interesting example because the cookbook is only a part of her message. Like yoga, I think, is very front and center, but this is the takeaway piece that made sense. So,
and the consistent thing with all of these people, and we've asked them for feedback on how these books are functioning in their brand, and they've all said things like Sharon has said here. The book has tremendously elevated my brand, and I'm only beginning to feel the impact. That sentiment is something that every single person has repeated, and that's awesome to see. It just does it in different ways for each one of them.
Yeah.
That's great. It's interesting to see the different types of books. I just want to remind our viewers that we are taking questions. I'm going to ask one more question and then break away to some of these questions that are coming in. But if you have a question, just tap on the Ask a Question tab and type in your question, and we will be getting to it. So my question is, what do I do if I don't think my clients or prospective clients will actually read a whole book? I mean, I'm dealing with short attention span theater here, and my audience is super busy, and, you know, are they really going to read a book?
It's a great question. And the good news is that the book doesn't have to be a daunting experience at all. And I think I'd love to just go back to some of the examples that we have here, just to make it really clear. Like Mcdermott's book is about 20% of the text that you would see in a normal, standard, full text book. And yet it's doing exactly what she wanted it to do. She had a very clear vision of just wanting to get her message down to something very succinct and accessible to people, and to not have it be an intimidating experience. So she was very, very good about really thinking about who her audience was and what they wanted and how to make her material feel really user-friendly.
And part of that is the format of this book is very small. It's like a gift trim, so it's sort of a little 5 by 5-ish square, and it's so high. There's very little text, and it's so highly visualized on the interior. So it almost reads like little infographics or little tiny bite-sized pieces of content you can put down and come back to, or just sort of have on your coffee table. So she worked with our editors pretty closely and designers to figure out how to take her ideas and digest them in this very, very accessible way. That was a specific goal of hers, knowing her audience.
Yeah, and in fact, I would say that it's really essential to your success to do that strategizing ahead of time, and that's something we help authors do all the time, is figuring out who that client is, how they want to digest your material, and so that is, and also how they're going to interact with your material. So you're asking, what does your audience want, and what can you bring to them? But I think you're also thinking, how do you interact with your clients? Do you need a giveaway at conferences, or do you need an interactive workbook that allows people to apply their own experiences in real time when you're working with them? Do you need something like this, sort of a sexy, graphically compelling book with short bursts of inspiration, or is your life story going to be the main source of inspiration, and you need the full text to tell them that? And I think that figuring that out ahead of time is really essential to making the book work effectively for you.
Yeah, and I'll just point you guys to one of the attachments that we've included here for you is a workshop type of thing where you can download that, and it's geared at helping you ask those questions of yourself that will get at what your audience would find most valuable and how you might be able to use this book in your marketing mix. And so by doing that little thought exercise, some things might begin to surface for you about, hey, maybe it's not just dumping my, thought leadership into a nonfiction footnoted format, 168-page thing. Maybe it's about giving my audience something that they are looking for that isn't what would be the first thing I think of, And I think that exercise is so worth doing, regardless of who you ever work with to make your book. I think too many people write a book that they kind of bullhorn style, this is what I want to say, and then think about marketing it. You should start before you write anything thinking about what your audience needs and would find most resonant. And so do that exercise first.
Yeah.
And then you can work with an editorial agency if you're just I just have ideas, or I just understand my audience, so I maybe don't know how to connect the dots. But
great.
Yeah. Anyway.
So I'm going to jump in with our first question here. I love our international audience. So Kathy from Newfoundland says she has a couple of book ideas circulating around in her head, and she's trying to figure out how does she figure out what's a viable idea?
So really, it's a great question, and I think that's where so many people, it's a little overwhelming to know where to start. So I would say actually that the workshop sheet that we've in the giveaway actually asks some really good leading questions. And again, the starting point would be, really thinking about your audience and your differentiator, and then maybe looking at the materials that you already have in place. So do you have an ongoing blog? If you have PowerPoint presentations or lectures or workshops, what materials you already have that could start to work for you? We certainly do a lot of one-on-one consulting about helping people develop a framework and structure for their book and figure out exactly what would resonate. So sort of brainstorming sessions to get to that point of like tailoring the book to the right people. So, and again, all that advanced work of thinking really carefully about the audience, your value proposition, how you're going to reach them, and what you want your book to do for you, all of that will pay off in the long run if you do that, if you take the time to do it carefully up front. What would you?
Yeah, we can also, I would add to that too, that part of the consulting that we do a lot of times up front, if you're in that ideating stage, or maybe I want a book and I'm not quite sure if this makes sense or is viable, like you said, we'll talk to you a lot, and part of that worksheet does ask these questions about your direct market. So if you're going to publish independently, you can't, as a business owner, you have an audience. We assume you know how to reach them. If we're working with you editorially to create a book that resonates with that audience, we can understand the size of that, pool that you have at your fingertips, and say, okay, well, if you can reach 5,000 people this way, or if you can reach 10,000 people this way, or you sort of start to tally up, like what is the size of my direct audience? Because yes, you can sell the book on Amazon. Beyond that, that's sort of gravy. You can market in general, but you also have a direct market usually as an entrepreneur that's pretty strong, and that's actually a great way to start thinking about independently publishing, is looking at that direct market and saying, I know that these people are going to be like bread and butter sales for this book, and I know how to reach them already, so that's great. But we can consult with you about what that might like, the strategy for that, what that might look like to reach them and layer on your various sales efforts. Cool. In addition to the editorial.
And back to the questions here, big changes in the publishing industry in the last few years. Can you talk a little bit about the difference between self-publishing and getting published traditionally, and where are things leaning these days? What's preferable?
Absolutely. This is Christina here, so I'm going to start with that. So it used to be that most people got published traditionally, which meant that you created a book proposal, which is essentially a business plan for the book, and you would submit it to an agent or a publisher, and the publisher would decide whether they had a big enough market to publish, to accept your book, and then they would handle the entire production process. So they would give you an advance, and then they would handle all the entire process of creating the book. While also this also means that they had a lot of editorial control. They make a lot of the decisions about what the cover is going to look like, how things get edited, and all with the goal of reaching a certain target market. And so that is still viable. But what's exciting today is that with the advent of print-on-demand publishing and various other technologies, individuals can become their own publisher and bypass that entire process of having to get accepted, of having to have proof of an entire market for their book. They can say, I need this book for my own purposes, and I don't have to print 1,000 books to be able to do this. What print-on-demand means is that you can create your book. You can hire an agency like ours to help you with editorial and design, or you can do it yourself. But you can upload to a place like Amazon, and Amazon, when someone orders the book, Amazon will print it, fulfill that order, handle all of the financial transactions, and send you your royalties. So there are all of these things that you're suddenly not the person having to handle orders and ship books, and it's a much more elegant solution. And so that explains, that's part of why self-publishing has exploded and been so successful, is that suddenly people can take matters into their own hands. They get to maintain editorial control. They get to do it on a much shorter timeline than traditional publishers. They keep more of the royalties, so they get a much bigger cut on every book. And basically, you get to make the decisions for, how your book is sold and how you want to use it.
Yeah, I would add to that yes, the royalty thing is actually a huge difference. You know, as in a traditional. So what a publisher is looking for is they're a business. They're making money from selling books. There's a lot of books that are so much more appropriately traditionally published, but there are a lot of book types that are almost more appropriately independently published. And when they're acquiring you, what they're looking for is your platform. So they're saying, great, we'll acquire this book and like foot the bill for all of the editorial and design, but we need to know that you know how to reach your audience. Demonstrate to us the size of your platform, and that's part of what's in the proposal materials. So you're coming to the table with a big platform, and that's what's going to get you a traditional publishing deal. But if you're coming to the table with a big platform, you should pause and say, wait a minute, I have a big platform. I know how to reach my readers myself. Perhaps it would make more sense, and this isn't always the case, but a lot of times, especially with entrepreneurs who are using this book in conjunction with their business, it a lot of times does make more sense for you to say, actually, I have my audience in my back pocket, so I'm going to do this on my own, and in doing it on my own, have full creative control so that I can make sure this aligns with my brand visual identity and tonality in the way that a publisher might undercut. So the creative control and the speed to publication is really different too. Like with a traditional publishing deal, I mean, it takes a long time to get acquired, and then usually the production cycle is about 1.5 years. So it's a super long-term thing. And if you publish independently, it's 7 or 8 months from manuscript to publication. So it's a much shorter-term deal.
We're getting a lot of questions about the process. Can you guys maybe perhaps outline a project plan or walk us through your process?
Yeah. I'd be happy. This is Megan. I'd be happy to do that. Sure. So we can start this process wherever you are. Some people come to the table with like, I have an idea, or maybe I don't have an idea. Maybe I just have a brand and I know I want to have a book for it. We can start with consulting. We can ghostwrite some manuscripts. We can start as far back as you need us to do. A lot of times people come to the table with a fairly well-crafted idea or maybe a manuscript. Once the book is written, then it goes through a 3-pass editorial process. So the first stage of that is developmental editing that looks at organization and structure and tone and all of the big picture stuff. And then it goes to a copy editor who is working very much on the line with nuances of grammar and style and kind of making the text squeaky clean on the line. And then after that, so while those 2 editorial passes are happening simultaneously, the cover design and the interior design is rolling. The interior is being set or the template styles are being set, essentially. You're saying, here's 12 pages and this is what I want the whole thing to look like, so that when the copy edit is clean, then it's laid out into that design that you've already agreed on. And then once it's in layout, it's proofread again by a 3rd editor completely. And then at the end, you have a set of final files of your front and back cover and interior, and we consult with you about where you're going to print those. But if you're going to print on demand, then they're uploaded for you to a platform such as KDP Print, which is Amazon's POD platform. And so the book, by the end of the engagement, the book is live on Amazon. Looks like any other book on Amazon. And if someone clicks on to buy it, a single copy is printed and sent directly to them without you having to go to the post office or anything like you used to have to do as a self-publisher. We also, some books are sent to an offset press, and that's just a different type of printing mechanism based on whatever format you're looking to achieve. But the whole process takes about 8 months, depending on the material.
Yeah. Gotcha. Yeah. And we've got a whole bunch more questions here. And folks, if you do want to ask a question, just click on the Ask a Question tab. Also, the Girl Friday Productions attachments are in the Attachments and Links tab. So, ladies, what are your thoughts about how to balance addressing a timely topic within your book? So, technology, digital media, etc., in a way that the book isn't out of date by the time it actually goes to print?
That's a great question. That is, so I would say, I would answer this, Megan, I would answer this in a couple of ways. For one thing, you have to accelerate. So for certain types of material, you do have to accelerate the production timeline, and that's totally possible to do. But meanwhile, while the book is in production, you can also be using material from it to market in a timely way. There's also a lot of, in the production cycle, I mean, I think that it's hard to speak about this without knowing exactly what type of material you're dealing with, but a lot of times there will be like certain sections that are dropped in at the last minute, or you know, if you're dealing with an election cycle for something, this happens a lot of times where if you don't know what's going to happen, it's a book that's published in right before after an election, and so you have like, you build it so that you can drop in material at the very last minute. Can kind of design the process to accept late breaking material like that. But in general, if the whole thing from start to finish is like a super timely topic, I think the best thing you can do, honestly, is probably publish it independently and accelerate the schedule so that you can be on top of the changing trends. And then the other nice thing is that if you do publish it independently, you're publishing print on demand. So that means you don't have a whole bunch of copies that are outdated. It means you can update the files whenever you want to, and you re-upload them, and then it's current again. So there's no lost, like, a traditional publisher would have a really hard time with that because they've printed 30,000 copies, and now what? They have to sell through them, you know.
We also, this is Christina here, we also are working currently with a client, for instance, who had material and blogs that were tied to trends, and she sent us a bunch of blog posts that referred to the election and the recent election and things that the material, and we're helping her editorially to draw out the material that doesn't need to be associated, like pinned to a certain time or the release of a certain movie, and recasting that material to make it work longer term. So that might not be what you're talking about here. The content actually might be out of date, but there are ways to take material where it happens to be tied to a trend, and that was right for the moment and for the blog post, but to translate it into something that can work longer term and that can get our message out without feeling out of date.
Mm-hmm. Oh, we're getting a ton of questions about costs. People want to know everything from kind of how much should they budget to have a book published and printed, production costs, publicity costs, you know, a range, obviously, you know, so many variables here, but, you know, can you give people an idea of kind of how to think about these things in their heads? And, you know, they really want to know kind of like what's it going to take?
Mm-hmm.
It's a really reasonable question, and obviously, as part of a business plan, you want to be able to plan for this. And we will go into some costs, but I want to start by saying it depends so much on where you are in the process and what kind of book you're trying to make. And that is not an attempt at evading the question. There are some costs are in the attachments that we sent that you'll see. Costs for book creation, for different kinds of marketing programs that we offer at Girl Friday, just to give you a baseline for our model. So there are different models out there, but that is that's a place that you can find some numbers. But just to give a couple of concrete examples, like the Change Starts With You, Court Mcdermott's book, the one that is up here, it's a black and white book. It's very short. The word count was short. Production-wise, it's a fairly the big cost was in the design, like creating that interior, but otherwise it is a very low cost book in terms of compared to if we look at Sharon McSteeney's book, we have you know, it's full color. The cookbooks are more complicated.
Photo shoot.
There's just a lot. So it depends on the material you're coming with, the type of book you want to make, but we can definitely say that if you're looking at like a 50,000 word book that you want to do at Girl Friday and that you want to take through the traditional production process, we're probably looking at somewhere in the area of $12,000 to $15,000 for the book creation, which includes the 3 rounds of editorial that Megan mentioned, the interior and cover design, and ebook conversion. It also includes the project management, and it also includes the big component that is hard to maybe fully grasp is the amount of consulting that goes in to that process. So the decision making around format, page count, pricing, distribution, the things, this is a little bit jargony, but like optimization, making sure that your book is categorized correctly on Amazon and that the appropriate keywords are there so that people can discover your book. So there's a lot, the consulting is a rather big component of all that. Mm-hmm. But do you have anything to?
Yeah, I guess I would just say, like, even outside of Girl Friday, the landscape is pretty diverse it's called hybrid publishing. So there's a lot of, if you go forth and look, the question to ask is, of any company that you come into contact with in the publishing landscape, is like how the royalty structure breaks down, because you'll find a lot, and literally every company is different the way that they do this. So Girl Friday is you're paying us upfront for creative, editorial, design, consulting fees, but you are truly independent in the sense that we don't have an ongoing relationship with you financially over your royalties, so you do own 100% of the proceeds from your book. Other places do have more of a hybrid model where the costs for editorial and production are lower, but there's a royalty split on the back end. So there's a lot of, it depends on what works for you. So just ask those questions when you go seeking help from people, because it is a very diverse landscape in terms of the business model out there.
Gotcha. One follow-up question on pricing. Someone was asking if an author gets preferential pricing for their book, or do they just have to get them on Amazon like the rest of the public?
Oh, no, there's an author. You can log in as an author, and you basically buy the book at cost. So for like a 6x9 paperback format, that would be about $2 to $3 per book that you're buying books for. Yeah.
I worked long ago and far away, so this information is about 10 years old. We went from, the company I was working with previously went from self-publishing to being managed by a publisher. So we were getting wholesale for the books initially, which was 50% of the cover price. And then when we went to a publisher, we moved to a royalty system. So a $9 book wholesale gave us about $4.50, and when we went to royalty, it gave us about 70 cents per book. So it was a difference.
Right, because the traditional royalty rate is like 6 to 8%. In most deals. So it's pretty significantly different. It's worth. I think that a lot of people actually don't ask those questions when they're talking to various types of publishers, but you want to know how much you're going to make per book. Obviously, that's an important question to ask.
So our next question is about marketing your book. So would you suggest having a dedicated website for each book? And they're also asking about the most cost-effective way to do that.
This is Megan. I oversee all of the marketing for our indie clients, so I will answer this question. I would say no. I wouldn't say that it's important to have a dedicated website for each book, because, especially if you're using your book as part of your brand, like a brand extension. If you're an author and it's like I'm writing a novel, then yes. Even if you're a if you own a business and you're an entrepreneur, you likely already have a website. If your book is in any way related to that, I would recommend adding the book in as a page to your website, because you don't want to split your traffic efforts, your traffic driving efforts. You want to try to collect those into a single site. You need to have an online presence for your book. It just depends on how that book functions in your mix, whether or not you have a separate website for it or integrate it into your existing one.
Great. One other question here. How closely does your book have to relate to the exact service as a consultant you are selling to be effective? What do you think?
I don't think that I think there's a lot of examples of books that are more obliquely related. So if it's in the same wheelhouse, I think that Sharon Feeney even is. Like this book we have up here. She is a yogi. So this cookbook is not directly related to what she's selling. What she sells is workshops and retreats, but it's like in the same wellness wheelhouse, and so it works to support her brand as I'm a wellness expert, even though it's not like she could have come and said, I want to do a book where I'm going to put like 5 classes down and photograph them and like guide you through what I would basically do at a retreat. That would be too on the nose. It doesn't have to be that way. It doesn't have to be a digestion of what you offer in your service, more obliquely related than that.
Okay.
I know this doesn't totally answer your question, but without an example, I don't know how to
I think it comes back to thinking about your audience, what, like, really solving a problem for them or meeting a need or selling a dream or figuring or surprising and delighting. There can be a lot of ways to reach that audience, but I think the audience and the how you plan to use the book are the fundamental starting point for how to do that effectively.
So another question we have from our audience is, what if you don't have a large built-in audience?
For your current business?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, that is fine. I mean, you have to start wherever you are, and a book can be a good marketing tool in and of itself. So you can use your book as another way to speak up. Like, think about the opportunity for publicity, for example. You don't get publicity unless you're doing something. Like, you have to have some sort of event or some sort of moment to say, like, guess what, this is happening. Otherwise, basically, you're not going to get a lot of press unless you have things going on in some way. A book launch is a thing. It's an event. It's something to announce. It's something to tease. It's something to talk about and drive traffic to, and maybe the book is the magnet where you're driving people to the book, and through that they discover your business and they sign up for your email list or whatever. So it can kind of have a little bit of a flywheel effect in that way, because your business can drive your book sales, and your book sales can also be a magnet for your business.
Great.
So I want to.
Okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
Another question from our audience is asking about an approach to turning a full-length book into a workbook.
That is absolutely, Christina here, that is absolutely something we help people do. We have a pro we can take, and we can either help you figure out how to do that yourself, or we can take that material and create the draft of the workbook on your behalf. But what's exciting about that is it's a way of updating your brand. It speaks exactly to what Megan was just talking to. It's a new excuse to, like, get out in front of people, so that if you have a book, if you did a book 3 years ago, maybe you want to update, have something new to give people. So I think that there are and workbooks can actually be done somewhat more, quickly if that's a priority. So if you have an event coming up, you can say, okay, this will be a new way to get front of mind. And we're really in favor of workbooks these days. There are a lot of ways to get your message into a workbook, your philosophy, your vision, your differentiators, while also really encouraging your audience to interact with that and apply it to their own lives. So if we're talking about staying power and, having a longer-term impact, books have this kind of can play a really big role in that.
Yeah, and just to add a little anecdote to that, this the How Do You Want to Show Up book that we have pictured here, just listening to it, we had done this book with her a couple of years ago, and she came and said, I don't know how to make this into a workbook, and so we basically took the book and wrote the workbook for her. So she just sort of outsourced that, because we can, with the nonfiction material, we can start with that, and the editors can make a workbook out of that.
And the workbook can contain quite a bit of content, so you can really get quite a bit of latest thinking out, into something like that.
Mm-hmm.
We have another question from our audience. If I'm not a business owner or a consultant, does it make sense to pursue a book as a passive income opportunity? I have lots of expertise, but I don't necessarily want them to buy my time, just my book.
Yes, it depends. I would say it depends very much on what you're trying to write, or what you're writing and what you're trying to sell, or whether this relates to your business at all. So on the one end of the spectrum, there's like being a novelist. Like, yes, that's a passive income stream. Harder to get traction there because it's such a crowded space, and if you don't have a following built up as you already as a debut author, it's trickier to build that over time. It's just a longer term game. But I would say yes, if you're not selling consulting, having a book with your brand on it is still a marketing tool that you can use to drive, because again, you can talk. It's something to talk about. It's something to create a content marketing plan out of. Whether or not you're driving people to sign up to talk to you for an hour, or whether you're trying to get speaking engagements, or whether you're trying to simply drive someone to your site for e-commerce reasons, having a book, if it's relevant to what your brand is, I think is still a useful tool.
Yeah. The only thing I would add there is when I talk to clients and their main goal is to support themselves through their book, I would say that's a difficult proposition. So if I think the passive income stream is a very reasonable goal, and but I think it works best when it's part of a greater marketing effort, when you realize that you might be judging its success not necessarily by direct return on sales as much as you're judging it by, I've gotten more speaking engagements, I've raised my fees, I have more visibility, I'm getting more coaching work. So the return doesn't necessarily come directly from sales, and it's just something to keep in mind. We want people to do the work of figuring out what investment they want to make and what return they want to make, but it's something to keep in mind when you're working out that equation for yourself.
Okay. We still have a ton of questions and only a little bit of time left, so I might not get to all of these questions. Maybe I can ask you guys, there might be some follow-up opportunities.
Yes,
well.
Absolutely. I'll let you get this, but in case people have to go, we are available. We talk to every client who is interested in a book. It's a very personal process. There's no one-size-fits-all. So we absolutely take the time to hear where you are in the process and to develop, a custom quote and to give you more information. So we're available for that if that's helpful after. Yeah.
Great. So our next question is referring to a book that is interviews with key industry leaders related to the topic. And the writer wants to know if she needs to pay for these interviews and for publishing them, or is it generally considered a bonus for the person being interviewed, being included in the book for their own brand?
I don't necessarily think there's a single right answer to that question. I'm sorry to not have a clear answer for you on that, but I think it depends so much on who's being interviewed, whether they are looking for more exposure or whether they already are the ones with the exposure and you're sort of using those interviews for your own purposes. So it depends a little bit on who's being interviewed, probably what the subject is. And certainly it's a conversation you could talk about it in more specific terms, or you could approach people and ask how they would feel about being published and get their take on it. But I don't, in my experience, it would be a single case by case. And sometimes even within a book, it's case by case. This person is big enough that they get some sort of a fee or something. I would say, or they negotiate it. But it's reasonable to start by asking someone if they would be available to be interviewed without offering a bunch of money for that.
So our next question is about someone whose dad wrote a book, and she's interested in getting the book printed and looking for your take on what platforms are the best for self-publishing and any resources that you can suggest.
Okay, about researching the audience. Yes, so in terms of self-publishing platforms, there's two major print-on-demand publishers. There are other ones that basically use those same presses and mark up the services. So I would recommend staying away from them. The two major competitors in the space are KDP Print, that's Amazon's proprietary POD press, and then their competitor is Ingram Spark. You can upload files directly to either of those platforms, and both of them have little royalty calculators on there. So you can go, it's not secret, you can go on there and like put in your trim size and page count, expected page count, and understand how much it would cost to print one of those books, or if you set a list price at this, then you would make this much money from them. So those are the two that I would be looking at for sure. In terms of ebook distribution, it would be KDP, which is the Kindle platform. And then the other distributor that we like to use is you can go directly, because there's so many different e-reading stores and devices. I like to use a distributor for the others. So a place like Smashwords will distribute your EPUB file to everywhere other than Kindle, basically. So it'll cover Google Play, iBookstore, all of the Kobo, Nook, all of those guys. So you'll make it available everywhere through that approach.
So our next question is really, you mentioned very briefly there, ebooks. What services do you offer to authors who focus on ebooks?
Yeah, so we do ebook conversion. We have a conversion team that specializes in that. So it's not an automated process. It's actually a person optimizing that material, because through the automated process you can get some weird glitches. So it just, ebooks and print books and audiobooks are all just different formats of a book. And so there isn't one that's better than the other. It depends on your audience. And so we approach, if you want to lead with the ebook, that's great. We'll make the ebook, and we'll make sure it really is, like, we can accomplish any of those formats. It really is a matter of making your marketing plan objective to drive traffic to the ebook edition rather than the print edition. Or maybe there is no print edition, and that's fine too. Generally speaking, it's a good idea to make your book available in all of the formats that readers like to digest content, so they have a choice. But it's not, it's sort of like, it's just as easy for us to work with an ebook and make a marketing plan that supports that versus a print book.
I would say, though, that in case there's a misconception or confusion around this, it's not actually less expensive to do an ebook. To produce an ebook.
Yeah.
So generally we would recommend that certainly if you want to have something that's a giveaway or that people are going to interact with, or, it's more satisfying to have a pile of books at an event or to be able to give something away after an event that you can put in their hands than to give them a link to something. In terms of the staying power we were talking about, there's a lot to be said for having that print edition, since it's not as extra cost. And we also generally advise that the ebook is always a good idea, because people are making it, eliminating obstacles to reading what you're looking at.
So as we're wrapping up, I think we've got still tons of questions, but maybe people can follow up with you directly. Any last words of wisdom?
I think this can be a really overwhelming idea, books and publishing books, because it's like a huge product that you make, and it's a big process, and there's so many people involved in it. But I would say that, we like to take the approach at Girl Friday of having an integrated team, so you have a single person and a whole team around you, and sometimes it feels good to just bring a team to your idea and not feel so alone in the whole thing.
Yeah. We have a lot of clients who are very excited to have some guidance. They still get to be the final decision maker, but I think they feel reassured by having the fact that they're making informed choices with people who love books and who love, who really know the process well. So
great. So just to wrap up, thank you again so much, Girl Friday Productions. And this webinar will be recorded and it will be up for replay so people can go back and go over any of those questions that they might have missed the answers to. Just in case anybody is interested, you can always sign up for our weekly newsletter and get more information about the Innovation Women Speak series, as well as tons of more information about great women speakers and about speaking. If you're interested in signing up to be one of our speakers, like Christina and like Megan, you can sign up on innovationwomen.com. You can use the promo code until midnight tonight, and that's IWWebinarGFP for Girl Friday Productions, and that's all in capital letters, and that gets you 25% off your first year, and that's until midnight tonight. So you get a lot of visibility when you join Innovation Women. We are your social media amplification. You get speaking invitations. You get a weekly list of calls for speakers. And if you're an author, we have special author promotional programs. So that's just part of being one of our members. So we do a lot of shout-outs and features in our newsletter, and obviously the guest speaking opportunities through our webinar program. And next webinar will be a more technical webinar. We're going to be talking about using Internet of Things and machine vision to reduce traffic fatalities. So I hope you'll be joining us on March 6, 2019, another Lunch and Learn, if you're on the East Coast at least. And we're going to be featuring Nancy Lee. So thank you again for joining us, and hope to see you again in 2 weeks.
Okay, thank you, Bobby, so much. It was such a pleasure to be here today. We really loved talking to you.
Thanks again. Take care.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Thank you so much.